Hi everyone, it's Marielle Gardner back with Accepting Therapy. We're interviewing Amelia Styer today. She is one of our interns at the practice. So excited to get to meet you and talk to you today. So we're going to go over a few questions and go from there. How are you, Amelia?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me to do this.
Sure. So let's jump right in. And this is one of my favorite questions to ask is kind of what made you join the field of mental health and become a therapist?
Sure. Yeah, that seems like a good place to start. So I'm a little bit of a late bloomer in entering this field. I'm not unfamiliar with the field. Both of my parents are actually psychologists. So
Oh,
it's been something that, has been in my world for a long time and that I've always really appreciated. But only recently, within, the past 5 years, did I decide to take the plunge and go back to grad school. Before that, I was worked in a number of different kinds of jobs, but mostly in the marketing and advertising sector. And just, after a while, I think like many folks that do get into the mental health profession, just realized that I wasn't feeling very fulfilled
mhm.
and that my skills were not really getting flexed the way that I wanted them to be, and that I might be happier getting into counseling. So yeah, so I put all that together and got my butt back in school and got my degree, or almost about to get my degree. And
Sure.
yeah, here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I hear that so often, where there's a lot of us who started out in something like I used to do hair, and
Oh,
then
really?
went to grad school. Yeah, so it's kind of funny how that works out, but
Oh,
so glad to have you.
thanks.
And it seems like you have a lot of great skills that make you naturally kind of good at this position too. So good fit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny how, like, throughout like different types of professions, people who are kind of naturally drawn toward counseling do find themselves in roles where you are doing just a lot of helping
Hmm.
in that way, but just not, you're not kind of not recognized as being a therapist or a counselor, but it's kind of something that you just find yourself doing. And I'm sure if you've done hair in the past, then you probably had that same experience.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So next question. How would you say that you bring cultural humility into your work or your practice with clients?
Sure. That's a really good question. I mean, I think I I would say that I start by, just trying to show a lot of curiosity and respect for others' unique experiences, and try to avoid making assumptions about anybody. And then alongside that, like really working hard to identify and challenge any biases that I might have brought along with me.
Mhm.
So a lot of that, I think, just comes in just doing work on your own to like understand your own cultural identities and what assumptions or biases or privileges that might come with those identities. Um, like we're bound to stumble across folks who own different cultural identities that we're unfamiliar with. And when that happens, I try to do my best to research and find out what I can about what it's like to be that person, and hopefully lighten the load or the burden for them in terms of educating me about who they are.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think curiosity is such a good way to look at it. Not making assumptions, but asking questions coming from a place of, open-mindedness and, the other piece of that, doing your own work, exploring your biases and how those might show up in the room.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
And, I know that, you're recently graduating and, still probably exploring this, but what would you say currently, anyway, your approach to therapy is?
Yes, being rather green, in terms of just entering this field. I'm still very much exploring, but I have had the benefit of being, a client in a therapy setting on different occasions throughout my life. So fortunately, I know at least how I want to be treated as a client and what's worked for me and what hasn't worked for me. Um, and I'd say first and foremost, like just, I try to show up as a genuine, authentic human being in the room, and um, and work toward developing like a trusting relationship or a bond with my clients. I've been to therapists before where I felt like they were very professional, but a little bit cold and kind of hard to bond with. And there's nothing wrong with that approach, but it didn't work for me. So I really focus on just like forming a deep relationship, being authentic, not putting on professional airs, and just being myself. And I find that by doing that, my clients tend to feel comfortable showing up as themselves too.
Sure.
And from there, my approach is pretty integrative. Some clients seem to really benefit from exploring their past and their upbringings and kind of what might have contributed to who they are today. Other people want to stay more in the here and now, and it's just more useful to just kind of focus on what's going on in the present. I would say I do like to really focus on people's narratives about themselves and the stories that they tell themselves. I think it's really important to evaluate and explore societal conditioning and cultural expectations and how that might impact how we feel about ourselves and
Sure.
the decisions that we make. And then I'd say, like, as far as like specific techniques, I'm a pretty big fan of, basic mindfulness principles. Really appreciate some of the tools that DBT offers.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm not like a trained DBT therapist or anything. I just tend to borrow and steal things that I like from that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it sounds like you definitely come from a more like genuine, warm, authentic kind of place. And then, you kind of adapt to the client's needs. Yeah, I think that's kind of how I work too, right? Like I would say that I'm like very Rogerian in that sense, but then also like I work from much more like a relational approach. So yeah, I think we kind of borrow from a lot of different ideas and theories and things like that and make our own identity as therapists. So cool.
Each theory has so much to offer.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a shame to narrowly focus in on any one.
Absolutely. I agree. Cool. So is there any particular like client that you would ideally like to work with or that you tend to seek out?
I've been keeping myself pretty open to different experiences with clients. So far, it seems that I don't know. I haven't necessarily, sought this out, but a lot of my clients tend to be younger adults in their 20s or early 30s. Uh, I'm actually, entering my middle age years. So working with middle age adults or older is something that I'm interested in doing eventually.
Mm-hmm.
But just so far, it hasn't worked out that I've worked with a lot of folks around my age group. So that's something I look forward to doing eventually. But yeah, just I think right now I'm focusing on working with adults mostly, and aside from that, like no particular type of client or population. I'm still just kind of exploring, um, you know, what kind of relationships seem to spark the best work in my own practice.
Sure. Absolutely. I think it's such a good idea to be, I guess, open-minded about that. And then the more experiences you have in doing so, you get to get a more clear idea about like who you like to work with, who you do your best work with, all of that. Yeah.
For sure.
Again, with other therapies and things like that, you're better off not being super narrow-minded and then you can kind of hone your skills that way.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, what would you say to someone who's maybe considering therapy and is hesitant to reach out?
Uh, I I know people like that um, who are hesitant to attend therapy, and I think it depends on what their hesitation is, but I find a lot of times that people might worry that going to therapy means that there's something like broken or wrong with them, or that they're sick, or have like really serious issues. And
Mhm.
that's just that's just not the case. I really think that folks ought to think about therapy as just a place to explore what's on their mind, a safe place to share what's going on in their life and not feel judged. Or honestly, there's just something really magical about having somebody deeply and empathetically listen to you,
Mhm.
which is something that we don't always get in our everyday lives. Like, no matter how many friends you have or how much you love your family, it's a rare thing to just have somebody give you that undivided attention. And there's something kind of magical that happens in the process of doing that, where people do tend to feel better just by sharing. And I would say finally on that point, like, going to therapy isn't necessarily something that has to happen forever. Some people benefit from just going a few times. Some clients do stay for a long time, but it's all kind of up to what you need. So
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just to get a deeper understanding of yourself, your relationships, um, I think that's huge. And that's one of the reasons that I like doing these interviews, is to kind of like demystify therapy, right? Like, it's really just two people talking, getting to know the client. You don't really get to know us very much, but yeah. And I think mental health is something that, I want to start to change that, because everybody has mental health,
Mm,
you know, and the way that we care for that through therapy or through self-care or coping, it's just like physical health.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like us to know about you, or like clients to know about you?
Um, I think and I would say this is probably true for many therapists. I find that it's been helpful for some of my clients to know that uh, the reason I'm doing this work is because I've myself have wrestled with my own issues surrounding mental health. And there is there's a motivation in there for me to just share my own learnings and
Sure.
the things that I've gathered over the years, with others who might find themselves in a similar spot, you know, um, that I might be able to help them sort things out in.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, I would say that is something that's important for people to know, that your therapist, or at least me, isn't somebody who's got all of their stuff together. they're they're just a human being who's worked hard on trying to understand themselves, and eventually you develop some ways of thinking and coping that I think can be really helpful when we're able to share that with others.
Mhm.
Um, and even if it's not necessarily a situation that I've been in exactly or personally, chances are I'll be able to relate to you in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and most importantly, I really focus on therapy as being like a collaborative experience. Like, we're kind of a team going on a journey together.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like that you said that, because I think the collaboration is so important, but also this idea of like perfection, or kind of viewing your therapist as being like perfect, or like mentally, like the epitome of mental health, right?
Yeah.
And, kind of taking away some of that pressure, and like, because we're human beings too. Nobody's perfect. And the goal is really just to get to a place where you're able to be happier in life, function better, all of that. But